One of my favorite movies of all time is My Cousin Vinny. It's a Joe Pesci movie, a comedy from, I want to say maybe like the mid or late 90s. Great movie. Just check it out if you haven't seen it. But I reference it just because there's one particular scene which I think is a nice segue into the topic I want to talk about today. So the premise of the movie is that Joe Pesci is like a wannabe lawyer who gets thrust into this situation where he has to defend a double murder trial, and he's the defense attorney and doesn't really know what he's doing. But there's a scene where he's trying to convince, who's actually his nephew, I believe, is up on trial for murder, and he's trying to convince him that although he has no experience, that his nephew should trust him, that he'll serve him well in court, and he'll do the best he can, and he thinks he's got a good shot to win. And he uses this analogy where he says the prosecution's case. He compares it to, or says they're trying to show it like it's a house of bricks, like it's super strong. There's a really strong foundation. It's very tight. It's just a great case that they have against them on the murder charge. And what he does is he takes out a deck of cards, and he takes one card, and he says, they're going to show you, and they're going to say, look at this house of bricks, and look at these bricks that I have. And, they're going to show you that the brick has four sides, just like you would expect a brick to have. And that the brick is a rectangle, which is the shape you would expect to see a brick to be. And it's red, and just like the color of a brick. And the point being, they're going to try and show you just in the right ways, a set of information or facts or whatever to show that this is a brick, and this is a house of bricks that I have. But if you can turn it and look at it at a different angle, you'll see that it's paper thin, and it's really a house of cards. So really kind of witty, clever explanation that he gives, and good scene, and again, great movie you should watch. But I think that's relevant to this topic because I want to touch on something that I've talked about before. It's this idea of when there's a situation in which there's uncertainty, whether it be an event that's unfolded or an individual's actions, and you're trying to assess what their motivation is or what their actions are working towards or what actually happened in this particular event. And the issue is that, let's assume there's two main narratives about what may have happened. When those two narratives have very similar fact bases or fact sets or data sets, whatever you want to call it, where the sequence of events, the things that are said, the things that are happening would look very similar if it's narrative one or narrative two, and you can compare it back to the brick scenario, right? If it were, you have this object, it could be a brick, it could be a card. There are certain facts or information about them that are the same. The number of sides, the shape, the color, etc. When you start to have situations like that, and there becomes uncertainty of, well, what is it? Is it a brick or is it a card? Those are particularly dangerous situations. Because if you're an individual who has, for whatever reason, come to a view, whether it be through bias or irrational thought or subjective thinking, or just something that's tied to your identity, you want to believe that thing is a brick, you will hone in on the fact that, hey, it's got the right shape, it's got the right color, etc. And that will give you the confidence you need to believe, hey, that's a brick. The problem is, again, it's very hard to then distinguish truth from reality, truth from make pretend. So what you have to do, right? What you have to think about is how do you break that? How do you break those fact sets and separate them so that you can see them for what they are? How can you turn the card on its side, if you will? So let's take an example, a real life example of this, and kind of speak about what it looks like and the importance of it. So let's take everybody's favorite topic right now, the coronavirus. And one aspect of that is the extreme kind of authoritarian measures that are being taken to keep people safe, seemingly. And what you're developing is two narratives around this, or two main narratives. One is, this is an unbelievably dangerous virus. The public officials are doing everything they can to keep people safe, understanding that it's very complex and it's very difficult, but they're taking all these steps because they know how dangerous this can be, how many people it can kill, so they need to take these super strict actions to keep people safe, right? That's one narrative. The other narrative is these are power-hungry people who either contrived this situation directly or just saw an opportunity within it and are now, drunk on power and taking all these super draconian measures to control the population towards some conspiracy, whatever that might be, mass vaccination to make money off of it, or just to assert more power as a government, and control people better towards whatever end they have, right? So you look at that instance and you say, okay, let's break this down. Let's assume it's narrative one. Let's assume there is a real health crisis here. What are the things you would expect to see if people really genuinely are looking at a situation where there's a novel virus, don't know how to treat it, don't know exactly how it works and why it kills certain people and why it doesn't others, and it's super contagious? Well, you would probably take extreme measures to try and stifle movement of the population, keep people home, limit all sorts of activities until you get to a point where you feel you have a better grasp of it or some sort of a cure or whatever the situation is, because it's just too risky. You would take these extreme measures and you would tell people, hey, we're doing this to protect you. It has to be done though. We need to extend the stay-at-home orders, right? You would do all these things that are being done. Okay, fair enough. What would you do if it were a conspiracy where you are trying to control the population or get to whatever conspiracy outcome, people believe? Well, if you wanted to do it effectively, likely you would do pretty much the same things. You would tell people this is a super dangerous virus. We don't understand it well enough yet. It's super contagious. We have to take these measures to control population movement, and we need to lock you down for your own good. We have to do it. Well, therein lies the rub, right? How am I meant to distinguish between those two things? How do I know which is which, right? And again, if I've already made a decision for whatever reason that I believe this is a conspiracy, all these facts that I see are going to feel like it's more proof and validation of my view. I'm going to see that it's red, that it's rectangle, that it's got four sides. All those things are going to be popping out at me saying, yep, see, see, it's definitely a brick, and vice versa on the other side. So there's a few things I think that you can do from both sides of that issue, right? Particularly if you are, in this scenario that we're doing with coronavirus, a public health official, right? I think there's a few different things you can do to try and break that paradigm that you have there, right? Try and break that for people so that they could see each narrative or situation for what it is. One is you can be super transparent, open, and own the fact that that is true, right? You can acknowledge the fact to say, listen, I understand the concerns. I understand we are doing things that are infringing on your liberties. We are doing things that would bring up fear that we are trying to control you as a population. And I understand that. But this is also what we would do if we're trying to keep you safe. So it's what we have to do. I don't want to do it, but it's what we have to do, right? And I think that can take you a certain distance and buy you some credibility, perhaps, with that. So that's one option, or one thing you could do. I think the second thing you could do is you can try and give up some control in the situation, right? And so in this scenario, the belief that there is a conspiracy is based on the idea that you right, the public official is in some sort of position of power, and you're trying to exert that over me. You're trying to use that to your advantage. So give up some of that control. If you are genuinely doing what you say you're doing, right? In this case, it's trying to protect people and keep people safe. Give up some of that control. And that could be as simple as having a very truly unfiltered town hall, where you take all questions and you allow people to express whatever concerns they have, not just controlled formal statements that are released in very controlled environments of getting questions and you're only answering certain ones. That only helps fit the narrative that you're going towards a conspiracy. Break that, give up that control, right? Or you could go even further to an extreme and say, hey, we're gonna keep this lockdown in place until, I'm making it up, right, June 1st. But as of June 1st, we're gonna do a public vote, right? We're gonna let the public, whatever county, state, wherever you are, we're gonna let the people vote and determine if we wanna keep this in place or not. I'm not gonna leave it up to me, right? That would help show that, you're giving up that control, that's something there. And that leads to the third thing I think you can do. I think you could do something that is in direct contrast to the narrative you are trying to disprove, right? So again, if you are a public official who's trying to keep people safe, but you're very cognizant of the fact that your actions could be misconstrued as something that's a conspiracy to control people, do something that directly counters that you would never do if you were truly trying to control people and drive this conspiracy. And that could be something like giving up that control, like we spoke before as an example, but you can go even further, right? It could be something like, I am not running for re-election, right? This is so important. I recognize the risk of how people might misinterpret my actions, that I am going on record now saying I will not be running for re-election. You can trust in that nothing I'm doing is to give me more power, give me more control, or keep you under my thumb in any way, shape, or form. All my actions are dedicated to try and help, the people and keep people safe. And this shows you that. This is directly counter to what you might imagine it would be. So I think those are some things people should be thinking about when they find themselves in this situation where their motivations or their actions have the chance to be misconstrued because they look exactly the same, right? And it's something to think about from the other side too. The person interpreting these situations, look for those types of things. Look for opportunities to find those areas where you say, right? Turn it on its side. I see that it's too thin. It can't be a brick because of this happened, or they did this, or they did that. I think it's super, super critical in these types of situations.